Rafine had just woken up from her sleep, her mind filled with confusion about the steps she should take. In the midst of her daydreaming, a voice startled her. The voice came from a teddy bear doll near her. "What are you worried about, kid?" Instead of being troubled, "Would you like to listen to my story?" it asked casually. However, Rafine felt the doll wouldn't be much help, so she ignored it and sank back into her thoughts. She thought about Adrian, her favorite character, who would be in danger if things continued as they were. She wondered, could the future be changed? Memories of receiving the teddy bear doll from Violet flashed back in her mind. "This is a gift for you," Violet said at that time. The realization that the scene didn't match the original story made Rafine aware she might be able to prevent the tragic ending that would befall the three main characters. She concluded that if Zircon, the male lead, didn't die, the country's destruction could be avoided. However, Rafine realized that just saving Zircon might not solve the core problem. The doll spoke up again, this time introducing itself as a wise spirit that could help her change her fate. Rafine responded skeptically, remembering its original terrifying form, a powerful creature that could destroy humans with a single push, but had a fatal weakness: stupidity. The doll didn't accept being considered stupid. It claimed to be a god who knew all the secrets of the world and was willing to help Rafine. Realizing that in the original story this doll was a talented shinsa loved by the female lead, Rafine finally decided to trust it and tell everything she knew about this world. In their further conversation, the doll muttered, "A created world. In other words, you might just be a character in a story." Rafine was surprised and asked, "Can the future be changed?" The doll nodded. It suggested that Zircon marry someone else so Adrian wouldn't be heartbroken. However, Rafine reminded that Zircon was still a child. The doll then suggested early engagement as an alternative. Rafine hugged the doll and asked who Zircon would marry. The doll replied that since Rafine wanted to change the future, it would be easier if she herself married Zircon. However, Rafine remembered that after his mother's death, Zircon became an obsessive and toxic person, which ultimately led to Violet's death. The doll suggested that they prevent the mother's death so that Zircon wouldn't become emotionally disturbed. But how could they? Even the priests couldn't cure the mother's illness. The doll laughed and revealed that there was a legendary artifact that could cure any disease, and it knew where it was located. Hope began to grow in Rafine's heart. She remembered Violet's warm and loving personality again. She felt that she couldn't let the story end sadly. Rafine declared her determination to live this life again, change the story's ending, and ensure Violet and Adrian were together. The doll suddenly commented that Rafine's facial expression looked terrifying. Rafine chuckled and replied that the people she loved had to be happy. After everything was done, she would leave. The doll called the plan perfect, and when asked its name, it introduced itself as Alexandra Rubius for Dina Caloni. Rafine frowned and chose to stick with calling it doll. Suddenly, the door opened. Rafine quickly pretended to sleep. The doll communicated telepathically that Duke Aston, his wife, and Adrian had arrived. Rafine grumbled inwardly because the doll was still noisy. Duke Aston stroked Rafine's head and expressed deep regret over his past, blaming himself. The Duchess calmed him down, assuring that Rafine would adjust. The Duke's touch felt warm on Rafine's head. Soon, Adrian thanked Violet, who replied lightly that there was no need to thank each other among friends. However, when Violet said goodbye, Rafine felt surprised and afraid of being left behind. She immediately got out of bed, hugged Violet tightly while crying, and begged Violet not to leave her. Rafine felt embarrassed because she couldn't control her emotions, blaming her small body that was easily ignited. Then they all sat down in the dining room. Rafine ate heartily and praised the food that was served. In her heart, she felt that everything now belonged to her. Violet encouraged her to eat more, treating her gently. To Rafine, Violet felt like an angel. The Duchess noticed Rafine's appetite and concluded that the little girl must have lived in poverty. The Duke then ordered the head butler to investigate Rafine's life while living in the Viscount Barrel's house. While bathing, Rafine reflected, wondering why Violet could be so perfect. Violet even helped her bathe and dry her hair. Afterwards, Violet said that this place was now Rafine's home, and they were her family. The word family reminded Rafine of her past filled with violence and pressure. She had been threatened due to debt, forced to earn money in a week, until she eventually died in an accident while fleeing. She still felt like a stranger in her new life and didn't deserve love. But when Adrian came and called himself her brother, thanking her for coming back, those words touched Rafine's heart. That night, the Duchess slept with Rafine. In her arms, Rafine felt like she was being hugged by a mother, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Alexander said that the Duchess would surely be happy if called mother. When asked if he wasn't sleeping, Alexander responded that he would certainly sleep, and reminded that his name wasn't Teddy Bear. A week had passed. The family relationship began to warm up. The Duchess no longer cried every time she saw Rafine, and Rafine felt more at ease. One morning, Duke Aston said that he would hug Rafine that day. Rafine was surprised and dropped her lollipop, then hugged the Duchess and nervously said she wanted to go with Violet. The Duke froze. The Duchess felt sorry, then asked her husband to step back. The Duke left with a heavy heart. In Violet's arms, Raphine felt a little calmer. She realized that Violet had been with her for a whole week. Even so, she was still afraid of adult men. The trauma from her past made it hard for her to accept the Duke's presence. She tried to calm herself down and said she shouldn't act like a little child. But deep down, the fear still lingered. Adrian invited her to have snacks together. Raphine welcomed the invitation enthusiastically, inviting Adrian and Violet to eat in the garden. Both agreed happily. Meanwhile, Duke Aston reflected on Raphine's fear of adult men. He suspected that the past trauma still lingered. With burning anger, he vowed to destroy Viscount Beryl, the man believed to be the cause of Raphine's wounds. In the garden, the snacks had been prepared. Violet fed Adrian gently, and Raphine watched them from a distance. The scene felt like a warm and loving film clip. Alexander suddenly spoke up, wondering about Zircon and his contract marriage. She explained that pressure from conservatives and threats from the second prince made Zircon choose a political alliance with his friend, Violet. There was no love in that marriage, just interests. However, it was only after Adrian's death that Violet realized her feelings. Raphine called it all a strange fate. Alexander suggested that Raphine get engaged early to avoid a contract marriage. Although she agreed, Raphine doubted whether anyone would listen to a little kid like her. Alexander laughed, calling her little kid, which annoyed Raphine. Alexander then suggested that Raphine make a promise with Zircon early on, so that he would remember her when he grew up. Raphine was impressed by her doll's intelligence. Previously, she thought Alexander was just strong but stupid. Now, she acknowledged his greatness. Suddenly, Adrian called Raphine and fed her cake while saying, "Ah." Raphine felt she had to eat it because her favorite character was feeding her. She laughed and opened her mouth. But Lois and Luca suddenly appeared and, with a mocking tone, questioned whether the small cake was enough for Raphine's so-called big mouth. Not stopping there, they went even further by teasingly offering to feed her as well. Raphine actually just wanted to enjoy that sweet moment with Adrian and secretly hoped the twins would leave soon. However, Lois eagerly insisted on being the first to feed her, while Luca interrupted, mischievously asking whose cake Lane actually wanted to eat. Raphine looked at both cakes with great interest. The sweet temptation of both made it impossible for her to choose. And unstoppable excitement, she firmly answered that she wanted both. The Duchess watched the moment from a distance with a gentle smile. The next day, Violet spoke to the Duke and Duchess about her intention to go home. The Duchess offered for her to stay longer, but Violet politely declined, mentioning that time with family was good for Raphine. They expressed their gratitude, although they felt unsure how to repay Violet's kindness. However, Raphine still refused to let Violet leave. She hugged her tightly and said she couldn't go. Violet reciprocated the hug and reassured her that everything would be fine. The Duchess added that Raphine was now part of their family and didn't need to be afraid anymore. The word family warmed Raphine's heart. After calming down, Raphine allowed Violet to go home on the condition that she had to come back tomorrow. Violet nodded while saying, "Of course, I'll definitely come." Raphine felt comforted and protected by that promise. She then whispered something to Adrian, to escort Violet home and not let her go alone. Raphine hoped they could be together even if just for a moment, so they could understand each other's feelings. Adrian then told his parents that he would escort Violet and would return after that. After dinner, Raphine and the Duchess were in the room. The Duchess explained that Raphine would sleep with her in the living room until the weekend, because Raphine's personal room was still under renovation. When Raphine asked if the room was really hers, the Duchess nodded gently and added that for the time being, she would also sleep with Raphine there. Initially, Raphine felt worried about being a bother. However, the warmth and comfort of hugging the Duchess dispelled her worries. She enjoyed the gentle scent of the woman and felt happy to have someone so gentle by her side at night. In her heart, Raphine wanted to call her mother, but hesitated. She was afraid that the Duchess wouldn't like it, so she eventually gave up on the idea. She just hugged the woman happily, letting the warmth fill her chest. A gentle knock at the door broke the atmosphere. It turned out Adrian came and asked if he could play with Raphine before bed. The Duchess welcomed him with a warm smile and said that he didn't need to ask permission for such things. Raphine felt relieved. She was grateful that it wasn't Duke Aston who came. Fear of adult men still lingered within her. Alexander, the living doll, teased her fear and called Raphine a little kid. Raphine retorted irritably that even adults could feel fear. Adrian then handed Raphine a rattle toy. She accepted it while expressing her thanks, although she wondered if this family truly considered her a baby. Soon after, Lois offered to play with dolls, while Luca suggested reading a fairy tale. Raphine felt awkward with the offers, but tried to remain polite. She then asked Adrian about Violet's news. Adrian replied that Violet had arrived home safely, then asked if Raphine liked her that much. Raphine nodded with a bright smile and answered, Yes, although she secretly began to think about Adrian's feelings towards Violet. Rafin knew that Adrian had liked Violet since childhood, but never got to express his feelings until the end of his life. Rafin felt sorry and vowed to make Adrian happy this time. With innocence, Rafin explained that she liked Violet because of her warmth, pleasant scent, soft voice, and because she often gave her delicious food. She hoped Violet could stay with them. Upon hearing this, Adrian immediately suggested that they take Violet for a walk tomorrow afternoon. Rafin paused, realizing that Adrian was still only 10 years old. It was natural that he didn't understand many things. Without hesitation, Rafin bluntly expressed her hope. She wanted Adrian and Violet to get married. The Duchess was shocked to hear it, and Adrian's face turned red as he exclaimed, "Rafin." Rafin giggled seeing Adrian's reaction. She realized that the boy was still so innocent. Adrian then told his mother that Rafin called him brother. Rafin was surprised. She thought Adrian blushed because of Violet, but it turned out it was because of her. The Duchess was also touched and mentioned that she clearly heard Rafin call Adrian by that title. Proudly, Adrian asserted, "That's right, Rafin. I'm your brother, Adrian." Rafin understood that Adrian really wanted that acknowledgement from her. Alexander, the doll, interrupted with a cautious tone, warning Rafin not to get too hopeful. Rafin nodded, acknowledging that her wish might be too much to fulfill. Adrian was still too childish and didn't understand many things. The next day, at breakfast, Rafin was still thinking about last night's incident, which she thought was a total failure. She concluded that there was only one way left, to flirt with Zircon first. With a strategic gaze, she looked at Adrian and called him brother. Adrian replied cheerfully, "Yes, Rafin." Lois and Luca immediately protested, because only Adrian got that special call. Rafin then asked when Violet would come. She started to feel that Violet could be her ally in carrying out this plan. Just then, Violet arrived and greeted them. Adrian welcomed her with joy, while Rafin immediately ran and hugged her tightly. Violet smiled and asked if Rafin had missed her. Rafin answered with a nod. Adrian thanked her, but Violet reminded him that they had agreed not to thank each other, because they were friends. Adrian chuckled and suggested that they have tea together in the garden. However, Rafin immediately interrupted. She wanted to take a walk with Violet. In her heart, she was formulating a strategy. If Zircon didn't come, then she would make him come. Adrian looked disappointed and asked if he had done something wrong. Rafin felt guilty seeing that expression, but she steeled herself, thinking that all this was for a better future. Rafin and Violet finally took a walk together. During the walk, Rafin asked if Violet and Adrian were friends. Violet nodded and said that they were like family. Unsatisfied, Rafin asked again if Violet had other friends. Violet affirmed, then mentioned the name Zircon, the crown prince of the empire. Hearing that name, Rafin immediately became interested and asked Violet to tell more. Violet described Zircon as a fairly popular and handsome man. Rafin hastily interrupted, asking if Zircon was more popular than Adrian. Violet replied that both were equally popular. She then asked in return why Rafin was so curious about Zircon. Rafin explained that since Zircon was Violet's friend, she wanted to know all of Violet's friends. "Because I really like you." Violet seemed touched by Rafin's attention, calling her sweet. She promised to bring Zircon tomorrow so that Rafin could meet him. Rafin welcomed the idea with joy, but with one condition: Violet had to come too. Alexander, who was secretly watching all this, commented sarcastically that Rafin's acting was very convincing. But Rafin didn't care. In her heart, she had made a decision. She would face Zircon, the dark and destructive character in the original story, to stop the coming darkness and save everyone.